Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Today is Wednesday. It is March the 18th, the day after St. Patrick's Day. I hope you guys are having a good middle of the week. It's going to be a rough one, I think, for politics. And today we're going to be talking about the man versus the machine, something I know just a little bit about, certainly not at the same profile or at the same level. But Joe Kent, who was the director of the National Counterterrorism Center, walked away from his job yesterday. And that is not something that most people do in Washington, D.C. Certainly not without a choice. It sounds like that decision was surprising to those that know him. I have very minimal experience dealing with Joe Kent, but my experience with him has been professional in the limited capacities that it is. And he also seems to represent one of the few people that was inside the administration that was really working against the machine of partisan politics, left and right kind of combined together to screw over the American people. And maybe more importantly, he was working under Tulsi Gabbard's office, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, which is the enemy of America in most ways. They work 80% against the agenda of what you guys thought you were going to get when the Trump administration put forward their 20 promises to America, which was a primarily domestic agenda. When you walk away from something like that, there are consequences. When you push back against something that is as big and dangerous as our intelligence apparatus, or what is known as the USIC, the United States Intelligence Community, you can pretty much expect that they will come at you from all sides. And not the least of which of those attacks is going to be a smear campaign. The smear campaign began yesterday in earnest after our show ended. I watched it. I'm going to read the letter. I'm going to play you some reflections of people that knew him, or knew, what he had to say prior to walking away from here. And then I want to reflect a little bit on just what it is to be the person that Joe Kent is. Like just broadly speaking, the number of folks that are taking attacks and pot shots at a man that they basically don't have, they wouldn't have the guts to say any of those things to his face. And they couldn't do a tenth of what he did when it comes to the physicality and the dedication and the difficulty of the jobs that he was involved in. So to act like some man was something that they have the ability to call out when they didn't have the ratings, they have no briefings, and they actually don't have any points to debunk what he said. I'm going to play you some Ben Shapiro. I've been reading a lot of Mark Levin. I won't do a Mark Levin. I'll save you guys that because it's really pathetic. There's some Laura Loomer. All the people, and it turns out they're all massively Zionist. Some of them are Jewish, some of them are not. But they're all very Zionistic, and they have decided to pick up this talking point, which I think is shocking, that Joe Kent was a known leaker. A leaker of what is what I want you to answer to yourself. Because if any of you have seen this already, the smear campaign is he's a known leaker and he didn't know what he was talking about. This is coming from a man who is a tier 1 operator, a CIA paramilitary officer, which is very different than a lot of what the CIA does, who was a Green Beret, was in the Ranger battalions, did 11 combat tours and lost his wife with young children while she was serving, to terror attacks, no less. For people to go out there and to act like they have more information, especially the average person, than what Joe Kent knew and what he saw, and especially for it to be the way that he said it, I think that looking at his old posts, you can see that he's actually been consistent. And I'm reminded of something that Mike Glover told me the first moment I went out there and started telling my story publicly to the Bonino audience. And it was a text message conversation, text message exchange that I had while I was sitting in the airport. I want to say it was in Palm Beach, but it could have been in Miami. I can't remember where I was leaving out of. And he essentially said, nobody can tell you what you know. Nobody can say what it is that you've seen from your own experience, that you're the man in the arena. And right now, Joe Kent is the man in the arena. And I hope he knows that there are as many people as there are detractors who seem to have an agenda. There are plenty of people that recognize that, at the very least, I don't know what he knows. And neither do you. So we're going to try to evaluate that. We're also going to talk about a bunch of other crazy things that are happening right now. There's going to be some hearings. There's going to be discussions about Markwayne Mullin, the new DHS secretary, is coming in. So I've got some stories on that. Some of these things I didn't even get a chance to read enough of them, other than I saw the headline. I was like, we should probably cover these stories. So we're going to kind of do a different show than normal. Usually what I do is I read everything that I'm going to talk to you guys about, and then we talk about it. Today I was busy grabbing clips of people saying things and being things. Let's start off with a read for our friends over at Silent, which is probably telling. When you've dealt with the intelligence community and you find out that one of your phones has taken down like 20 gigabytes of data. I have my work phone currently sitting in a silent bag on the floor on purpose because I got charged $75 in data for a phone that is on Wi-Fi and doesn't actually ring and shouldn't have anything connected to cellular. It's on freaking airplane mode. So I don't know if I got hacked or what, but it's sitting in a silent bag. And if you guys want to make sure that you are doing the same things and you have the ability to, I don't know, like protect yourself from government agencies that might want to find out what you're up to, or maybe it's just maybe you just need to get off grid. Let's talk about the folks over at Silent real quickly. And I'm going to put them on the screen. Yeah, we'll put them on the screen right now. All right. Your phone is a tracking device. There's basically no doubt about that. You shouldn't have any question about what it does. It's picking up data on you all day long, and it's doing so, and it's sharing that information through a variety of different mechanisms. Cellular is one of them. Mine's being apparently exploited for that. Wi-Fi is another. Bluetooth, GPS, RFID, the radio frequency ID, near field communications. There's all these different signals coming out. They're constantly pinging against Wi-Fi networks. They're constantly pinging against collectors and so on. And they are saying where you're going and where you've been and what you're up to. And so if you want to be able to shut that stuff off, and some of you actually do, and some of you probably should. The other thing is that you can protect your family, your freedom. You can also just protect your sanity by putting it in the bag. Like, put it in a bag like I did yesterday. Go to church sometimes and just get away from it. Have it disconnected from the smartwatch that you have, and take a moment of peace where you're off the grid and you're away from it all. You can do that by dropping it into a silent Faraday sling or bag or backpack. I've got mine on the desk right now. Folks, check them out. It's slnt.com/KYLE, silent.com/Kyle, slnt.com/KYLE. Keep watching. You're going to see it bump up, and at some point very soon, you're probably going to be able to see the multicam black available for sale, which is my favorite way of going about it. Check them out. You just saw a picture from SHOT Show where the backpacks are all starting to come in a new colorway, which is essentially very similar to the old colorway, but it's got a little bit of green in it. Aaron, who's the founder of the company or the CEO, and I had a funny joke about that. But honest to God, like, I love multicam black. They're starting to do my colors and my colors almost only. Check out Silent. Great products, well designed, very comfortable, and they work, which is not the thing you can say for the cheap Faraday stuff that comes in off Amazon from Chinesium. slnt.com/KYLE. Link in the show description. Let's do today's show. We got a lot to cover. I feel like maybe we should lead with Donald Trump on Joe Kent. I don't always jump into the main story right away, but sometimes we should jump into the main story right away. So let's just do that right now because I think it's relevant. And here's the introduction. Joe Kent ran for Congress twice, did not win, was then eventually appointed under Tulsi Gabbard into this director spot that he walked away from yesterday. And so let's get the president's take. This is prior to the election. This is when they were both in the campaign season. What did he have to say about Joe Kent? Again, a Ranger, Green Beret, a member of a Tier 1 Special Operations Unit most of you are not familiar with. We sometimes call it Task Force Orange or Orange. It's also known as the Activity or ISA. You guys are welcome to look up the Intelligence Support Activity. It started off as a support option and a Tier 2 unit for Delta Force or whatever they're calling it now, CAG and so on. It became its own Tier 1 Special Operations Unit. They do color revolutions. They do long-term activities behind enemy lines, operating almost always like by themselves or with very, very small units. Really difficult stuff, totally different type of mission set, embedded, a very much more like an intelligence operative than an operator, with the operator capabilities as well. Dude had 11 combat tours. I mean, when you look at the resume and then you recognize that he went in there, and the people that I know that are working around the ODNI circles recognize that he was one of the people that was pushing back at the probably 80% of the intelligence community that does want to screw with the agenda that many of you voted for. If you voted for this, Agenda 47, you have about 80% of the U.S. intel community across the board that think that they should have the say on what goes on. The deep state operations and the sort of embedded bureaucracy of the intel community, they lean aggressively to the left. And from what I can tell, even though people say, oh, he's a lefty, oh, he's done this, I've got some examples of that. Laura Ingraham kind of says the same thing. Dan Bongino said the same thing. A smart person doesn't just line up on a party. That's what I will say to you. I don't know anybody that's absolutely brilliant that says, oh, I'm 100% behind this fill in the blank political party. That's just not how people work. The political parties are too often serving the party and not some sort of, honest, honorable, ideological place. There's a reason why I'm a post-partisan advocate. This is what bacon, cheeseburger, nationalism is about. We can find common ground with people that are on the left. I guarantee you, I can find common ground with people who thought Bernie Sanders was a winner without any difficulty. I can find common ground with people who said that Kamala Harris was a good idea. I can also probably convince them that certain things she said were not good ideas. Because if you get to people on a one-to-one basis, you recognize that they're not monolithic. This is why elections theoretically would change back and forth. I don't think we have elections. We're going to talk about those as well, because the SAVE Act apparently is going to be pegged to FISA. And that's the brilliant mind of Anna Paulina Luna wants to peg these things together, which I think is terrible. It is going to show us that we're going to accept spying if we get nominally cleaner elections. Wild. Anyhow, all right, let's do Donald Trump talking about Joe Kent early on.
But I'd like to introduce Joe to say a few words. A very incredible guy and with a tremendous future, in my opinion. Right now, he's only thinking about Congress, and maybe he'll be there for a number of years, and we don't know what's going to happen, but I think this man has a tremendous future, very special person. Thank you very much. Come on over, Joe.
Well, thank you so much.
That's a nice thing to say. Let's hear from Sean Ryan as well. Sean Ryan has done some shows with him, refers to him as a friend. I think that's a reasonable place to start as well. Let's do this. Here we go.
First thing I saw this morning, my good friend Joe Kent resigned.
Yeah.
And I want to read, I thought his statement was really good. And, I've been really hoping that somebody notable in this administration would make a statement and resign.
And he did, and it's a great statement.
I think that I think that's all you can do at this point is, and if you're in there, because there's a lot of them in there that don't agree with what the fuck is happening.
Yeah.
If you're in there and you've been selected and trusted to do a job and you're not able to do it, then what the fuck are you still doing in there? This is the way.
We can ask that of a vast majority of the people, not all government employees. I think we have to ask that question about most of our representatives.
Sad state of affairs. I just want to read a couple of sections of his resignation letter.
Yeah.
President Trump, after much reflection, I have decided to resign from my position as director of the National Counterterrorism Center, effective today. I cannot in good conscience support the ongoing war in Iran. Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation, and it is clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby. I'm going to skip this next part and skip to the end. As a veteran who deployed to combat 11 times and as a Gold Star husband who lost my beloved wife Shannon in a war manufactured by Israel, I cannot support sending the next generation off to fight and die in a war that serves no benefit to the American people nor justifies the cost of American lives. I pray you will reflect upon what we are doing in Iran and who we are doing it for. The time for bold action is now. You can reverse course and chart a new path for our nation, or you can allow us to slip further toward decline and chaos. You hold the cards.
Mm-hmm.
That's Joe Kent. And for anybody that doesn't think that we are under Israeli influence, there was a really good article in the Wall Street Journal about how Senator Lindsey Graham out of South Carolina, is influencing Trump and the administration into this war. And here's one section out of this. To help make the case on Iran, Graham traveled several times to Israel in recent weeks, meeting with members of the country's intelligence agency. They'll tell me things our own government won't tell me. That's in quotes. He said he spoke with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, coaching him on how to lobby the president for action. Netanyahu showed the president intelligence that persuaded Trump to go ahead.
Yep.
So we have a
Sink in. Let that sink in. A United States senator traveled and talked to a foreign leader and mentored them and coached them on how to get a better deal from our president. That should be treasonous.
It's really something. It really is. That statement, Lindsey Graham making those moves, right? I think that it's worth us considering, like, what does that even mean? Here's Lindsey Graham saying that the war could be over, that we got plenty of good things we can do. Let's go in and grab Carg Island. The war boner is raging. He also said we should be going after Cuba. So I don't know if that's what's up next, but if it is, it tells you who's calling the shots, or at least tells you who's saying what the shots are going to look like.
Carg Island, 90% of their income comes from oil and gas revenue. 100% of that revenue generating capabilities on a single island. Mr. President, take Carg Island. This war is over.
All right. Well, when you say you want to take something, that means you have to put physical boots on the ground. Do you not? Is that not the only way that you can, quote unquote, take something? You have to physically go there and stomp on the ground and then own it. So it does sound like he's asking for that. I've got a quick little clip here, which I'm going to grab. This is the Senate leader, Thune, talking about doing just that. Are we going to put boots on the ground? Is that where we're at?
Ultimately, we'll be successful in getting these opened up there.
Do you think ground troops are necessary? Would you support
I'm not ruling anything in or out. I think that's obviously a decision that ultimately our war planners have to make, but I don't believe, at least from everything I've been told, that that's something that is being contemplated. But our Senator Cotton is the chair of our Intelligence Committee, and you want anything you want?
Yeah, does anybody else want to talk about this? Because it sounds like we're not ruling anything in. We're not ruling anything out. Here's some really strange stuff. There's some footage that's been popping up, including stuff from yesterday of Donald Trump speaking. And when you hear certain things, it makes me pause. I don't know if any of you thought you were electing Susie Wiles. Maybe I'll put the chat up on the screen for a second. Anyone listening here, please give me a comment below, because I actually do want to read this. I don't know if I can do a poll, but maybe I'll do a poll over on Spotify. You guys can respond to that. Was there an instinct that when you pulled the lever for Donald Trump, if you did, or if you went for another candidate, so be it. But did you think, I want to elect Susie Wiles, a former lobbyist? I want to know what she has to say. I want to know what she's going to do. Forget whatever the promises were made, and this man went out and did all these campaign rallies and the campaign, because Susie Wiles was the power behind the throne, right? She was the one that helped coordinate the campaign. So is that what you were looking for? Yesterday, one of the former Trump administration officials was in a protracted back and forth on social media with me about my statement that I wonder when we're going to see a graceful exit of Susie Wiles out of the White House. And I say that specifically, as you guys heard I said yesterday, she's been diagnosed with cancer publicly. That's the claim. I don't even know if that's true, because there's so many information ops that get run. It's just as easy to say cancer or health problems or spend time with my family or whatever it is when somebody wants to walk away from a job. It's known as a graceful exit. You guys know what a graceful exit is? Let me just explain it lest there be any confusion. To say, when will this person have a graceful exit, is not saying that I wish this person will die. That is obviously not even close to it. A graceful exit is what you and your wife cook up, your husband and you cook up, when you're at a party that you're no longer interested in being at. And rather than saying, hey guys, we're bored here, we'd like to leave because there's better things for us to do, or we're really sick of being with you, we would rather go do something else. A graceful exit is saying, we have to work early in the morning, and it's been really great hanging out with you, but we're going to leave now. That's a graceful exit. It is choosing maybe a half-truth or kind of like a little fib. The other thing about cancer is that once you have cancer, nobody can attack you anymore, right? Didn't they do that with Joe Biden? Oh, he has a cancer diagnosis. So all of his sins and crimes, now we have to focus in on his health. And it would be really mean if you would attack somebody who has cancer rather than just look at them based on the entirety of their life. I'll look at Joe Biden and say he may have cancer. He also looked like a rotten person. He seemed like a bully and an asshole for his entire life. So, like, that's fine. That doesn't change because you have cancer. But this was the back and forth that I got. Did you people elect Susie Wiles? Did you think, I'm going to put Donald Trump into office because I want to know what Susie Wiles is going to do? And it's a simple question, and you have to answer it yourself. I don't know what the answer is. I do know that Donald Trump said this yesterday. And it makes you wonder, why do you have to ask permission from your chief of staff? And I get that this is kind of a device that he's using. This is a Donald Trump device. I also don't know anyone else that he went up to. I had to talk to Marco. I had to talk to Marco Rubio, the lovely, beautiful Marco Rubio. And I said, Marco, do you think can we do this? Can I do a little thing that is different than this? Does he ask permission of his vice president, whose political career is in his hands? No. This is a weird statement, objectively strange. Enjoy Donald Trump getting permission from Susie Wiles to do the Iran thing.
We're doing great. I went to Susie, my beautiful Susie Wiles. There's nobody like Susie. I went to Susie. Right? And everybody's with her, and she's a great woman, really. She's a great woman. But I went to Susie. I always go to Susie. I said, Susie, do you mind if I take a little excursion here? Do you mind if I... we're hitting all these records, right? More people are working in the United States today than ever before. I could name this. I don't want to bore you because this is all about Ireland. This is all about, but you're a big part of it because you're a big part of this country. But I said, do you mind if I take a little excursion, my chief of staff? Because I want to do this. I have Marco here. We have a lot of our great people. JD is here. They're all here, and I say, let's do this. We got to do it right. Should have been done by many presidents. Should have been done long before 47 years. It's 40 years of living in terror. They're called the bully of the Middle East, but they're really the bully of the world because he used oil to bribe, right? They used oil to bribe and to, gain power. I don't know what they gained. What did they gain? What the hell? How are they doing? Not so good. They're all gone now. Every one of them, they're all gone. We don't even know our biggest problem, we don't know who to deal with. Over here, I can call the Speaker of the House. He's so powerful. I can call him. I can make a deal. Maybe. I can even call your Democrat counterpart, this guy. I said to Kelly, what do you think of your counterpart? He said he's a great guy. This is Republican Democrat. I never thought I was going to hear that about you. Let me shake your hand for a second.
What is that all about? Here's the post that Joe Kent made yesterday. It happened while we were on the show, while we were going live. You guys were posting it in the chat. I saw it. Nothing I could do about it. I don't try to change course while we're in the middle of doing something. I don't try to reflect on something live. I like to think on it for a while. He says, after much reflection, I've decided to resign from my position as the director of the National Counterterrorism Center effective today. I cannot in good conscience support the ongoing war in Iran. Iran posed no imminent threat. The key there are the words imminent threat. These are the words we use in law enforcement when we talk about whether or not deadly force is authorized. Imminence is a concept that means that it is immediate. It is right there. I think Iran has always posed a long-term threat. I think that's been the case for anybody who talks about them. But imminence is a really, it's a specific concept. He said, it's clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby. That is not a small claim. That is not a graceful exit. A graceful exit is saying, I'd like to spend more time with my family. I really appreciate the opportunity and I got to get out. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here. Saying that this is due to pressure from something that you cannot support, that's taking a stand. And taking a stand is specific. And I don't have the intelligence to back it up. In other words, I didn't get the briefings and neither did you. But I also know what you didn't get. You didn't get the leaks that he supposedly provided. Because every person that's out there attacking him said he's a known leaker. Based on what? Known to who? Leaked to who? Leaked what to whom? Is the question. You have to be able to answer that question with some sort of accuracy. And you're not in a position to do it, and neither am I. So whenever I see these people go out there and make these attacks, I know that you're just parroting garbage. The concept of being a leaker implies that the leak was something of value or something that was guarded, which means that you're talking about a felony accusation. Now, someone who's had felony accusations lobbied and bandied about in what were called whisper campaigns about myself in Washington, D.C., Seraphin shot at a guy. Seraphin misused his service weapon and did these things. I've had phone calls from reporters asking me about them. And I'm like, how do you think that went down? You think that I shot at somebody and then I just went away and we all got burgers or pancakes? And when you walk them through the paces, it's the same story. Ask yourself the following question. If you're inclined to believe that Joe Kent is a quote unquote leaker, what did he leak? And to whom? And if it was something that he was not allowed to share with anybody, you know, things like classified information, a guy who spent 20 years in the military with a top secret clearance, doing top secret missions, secured compartmented information read-ins, intel gathering that would be given to him from specific intel gathering platforms that are all compartmented, like the top stuff that we protect in this country for national security. You think after that, and then working for the CIA, the guy doesn't know how to keep his mouth shut on something? So he leaked something. What did he leak? Because leaking national security information, leaking national defense information is a felony. So why is he not in handcuffs? In the same reason that you know that I didn't take a shot at some guy's head across the range in New Mexico. You know it didn't happen because I walked away from there with no handcuffs. And nobody investigated me, tackled me, and put me in prison that night for shooting at an agent of the federal government. In the same way that this man didn't leak classified information. That's just not how it works. They found that out, he'd be done. He wouldn't get to resign and hang around. It's been an honor serving under the POTUS and the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, and leading the professionals at NCTC. May God bless America. There's his post here. I'll put this in the link so you guys can read it. There's a couple things that are really important on there. He said, and this is why I think that we have a strong statement, which means you have to come after him. The statement he said is that I support the values. He's writing this to Donald Trump. I support the values and foreign policies you campaigned on in 2016, 2020, and 2024, which you enacted in your first term. And until June of 2025, you understood that the wars in the Middle East were a trap that robbed America of precious lives of our patriots and depleted the wealth and prosperity of our nation. In your first administration, you understood better than any modern president how to decisively apply military power without getting us drawn into a never-ending war. And you demonstrated this by killing Soleimani and defeating ISIS. That is a compliment, saying that I believed in what you said. In the same way that all of you who voted for a domestic agenda and no new wars, and anybody who has had to have the brain chip changed over to say, well, this was an old war and we've been at war with Iran for 47 years. We've always been at war with Iran because Iran has always been a war. What was the imminent threat? And I'm going to play you some people saying it, and it's real sketchy. He said, early on in this administration, high-ranking Israeli officials and influential members of the American media deployed a misinformation campaign that wholly undermined your America First platform and sowed a pro-war sentiment to encourage war with Iran. That seems objectively accurate from where I'm sitting. I've watched it. Pro-war sentiment, undermine, misinformation campaign. You can see all the people who have flipped and flopped on all this garbage. The echo chamber that was used to deceive you into believing Iran posed an imminent threat to the United States and that you needed to strike now. There was a clear, swift path to victory. That is not the case. This was a lie. It's the same tactics the Israelis used to draw us into the disastrous Iraq war. Apparently, this is conspiratorial, and apparently, this is also anti-Semitic. And here's where I start getting real uncomfortable with some of this nonsense. This is Mitch McConnell, who basically is barely sentient. Mitch McConnell is half dead. He may actually already be brain dead, for all we can tell. He can't walk. He can't move. His body is a skeleton. He's the skeleton of a turtle. He's got like basically his scales just hanging off of him. And he wrote this allegedly. This is a staffer, most clearly. Mitch McConnell. Joe Kent testified before the Senate 1 year ago that Iran and its terror proxies threatened U.S. service members in the Middle East. Read that very specifically. Iran, proxies, service members in the Middle East. Not American homeland. Not a threat to the United States. The only reason that they're a threat to people in the Middle East is because we put people in the Middle East. He said it would be an honor to return to the fight against terrorism, that he pledged to lead with integrity and accountability. It turns out integrity and accountability also mean, whether you guys like it or not, that when you disagree with a decision, you walk away from it if you cannot affect change. You want to know the opposite of this? It's a guy named Ed Martin. Ed Martin was removed from all of his positions. I've spoken to Alex Jones about this a number of times, and he constantly is talking about the things that he and Ed Martin have talked about, and then Ed Martin is completely neutered at the things he was doing at DOJ, but he stuck around. Why? Because in Washington, D.C., when you get a taste or an option to get close to power, nobody walks away from it, because the first thing that happens is they smear you, and the second thing is you no longer have any access. Most people would rather have access and a paycheck than they would have integrity and accountability and walking away from something you don't agree with. And he didn't make any accusations. What he said is that I see a material difference between what you said and what you're doing. By the way, we say the same thing here every single day. Nobody is mad that Donald Trump made promises. They're only mad, at least in the circle that I'm running in, that he didn't keep the promises. That's the big problem. It's not like, well, we didn't want you to deport people and you're a jerk because you're deporting them. No. I had someone from a very large left-wing social media platform reach out to me and say, we should support this guy, some Democrat in Kansas. It's like, go F yourself. You have no idea what we're talking about. Nothing. I want more of what was promised, not less of it, you fools. And that's what integrity and accountability would look like. You own it. He didn't say anyone else believes this. He said, I believe this, and therefore I can no longer serve in it. There's nothing wrong with that. And if that's performative to you, then deal with it. The virulent anti-Semitism of his resignation letter, what in the actual F are we talking about right now? To make a claim that the United States is working on behalf of a foreign nation. I did it yesterday. I'm going to do it. It's called the mirror test. Again, all you got to do is hold up the mirror. Does it work for anyone else? I'll finish reading this in a second. If you were to hold up a mirror where a man does something and a woman does something, and if it would be wrong for a man in the workplace, then you know it would be wrong for a woman in the workplace. I did this with Steve Baker. I was talking on the phone. I go, imagine this. My boss comes up. She puts her arm on my shoulder, which was already awkward because I didn't like it. I didn't want to touch her. She puts her arm on my shoulder and says, Kyle, it's a really nice shirt. You should wear it more frequently. This is an actual event that happened. 2017, FBI field office, Washington, D.C. Kyle, that's a really nice shirt. You should wear it more often. I actually know what the shirt was because I gave it away. It was a blue REI button-up shirt. Now imagine a man who's a supervisor walks up to a woman. Helen, that's a really nice shirt. You should wear it more frequently. Hey, that's a good-looking blouse on you. You should wear it often. Fired. HR warning. We know it's wrong because you can apply it on the other side. Now put the word swap Israel for any other nation in the United States. Anyone. Some United States senator comes up and says, we need to be more, I cannot believe that people are not more pro-Uganda. I do not understand why we are not more supportive of the Philippines. The Philippines is our greatest ally. Objectively false. Israel is our greatest ally. Objectively false. Not our greatest ally. We have greatest allies. They're called the Five Eyes. We share all kinds of stuff. Add any single other nation into the space instead of the word Israel, which is not an ethno-state, even though they like to make that conflation. Try to put it in there and see if it makes sense to you, because it's absurd. The Germans are our greatest ally in the world. The French are our greatest ally. I do not understand why people are being so anti-French. It's Francophobia. Okay, it's Anglophobia. That's what's going on here. It's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous statement. Mitch McConnell. The virulent anti-Semitism of his resignation letter made it clear that Mr. Kent is incapable of upholding these pledges, and that those who mistake its baseless and incendiary conspiracies for brave truth-telling are only fooling themselves. Asshole, if you say things like this, it makes me think that what he's saying is 100% correct, because this is a ridiculous, over-the-top Mark Levin post.
The virulent anti-Semitism in his resignation letter makes it clear that Mr. Kent is incapable of upholding these pledges. And those who mistake its baseless and incendiary conspiracies for truth-telling bravery are only fooling themselves. Isolationists and anti-Semites have no room in either party. They are the Nazis of today.
Just weak, pathetic garbage from a non-sentient human being. So who wrote this? The people that work for Mitch McConnell. You think Mitch McConnell can type out a post this long? Mitch McConnell can't even walk from a doorway into a chair in the room. There is zero chance this was written by Mitch McConnell. Isolationists and anti-Semites have no place in our party. Really? Because that's kind of what Donald Trump ran on, a semi-isolationist. What is the Don Roe doctrine anyway? Didn't he say he wanted us to keep people isolated from our hemisphere? And now we're on an excursion and he had to ask Susie Wiles for permission. What a weird, bizarre moment. Let's go to another thing that I think is, if not, it may not be complete cowardice, because I don't know what the end game in here, and I'm willing to hold this back. But Tulsi Gabbard had a response to this as well. This is Tulsi Gabbard's employee who just walked out. You read this, there's no condemnation. There is no disagreement with what Joe Kent said. And it makes me think that there's no daylight there. And I'm going to say that because Tulsi Gabbard wrote something very, very political. This might be the most political, semi-terrorist, gun-to-the-head moment you could ever see from someone who thinks they might still be able to have some effect inside this administration. Donald Trump, this is a direct quote from her post yesterday. Donald Trump was overwhelmingly elected by the American people to be the president and commander-in-chief. As our commander-in-chief, he is responsible for determining what is and what is not an imminent threat, and whether or not to take action he deems necessary to protect the safety of troops and the security of our troops, the American people and our country. Sorry, I missed the commas there. The Office of the Director of National Intelligence is responsible for helping coordinate and integrate all intelligence to provide the president and the commander-in-chief with the best information available to inform his decisions. After carefully reviewing all the information before him, President Trump concluded that the terrorist Islamist regime in Iran posed an imminent threat, and he took action based on that conclusion. That doesn't say that she agrees with him. That doesn't say that she believes that that is the case. She said that our job was to present information. We presented it, and Donald Trump made a decision. Those are all objectively true things. What she doesn't say is that my former director was wrong, or that his conclusions were unwarranted, or that the information we presented actually proved that to him, or should have proved it to him. I want you to look at the words that are being written, because I guarantee you that this was meticulously edited and gone over. Based on what I read right there, and based on the historical positions of Tulsi Gabbard, let's scroll down and look at them. This is the most political post you could have. 2020, no war with Iran. She was selling T-shirts about it. A lot of people are bringing that up. Why is that? Well, she doesn't say that there should be a war. It's real simple. She said that Donald Trump reviewed the information that they gave, and other people gave as well, and came up with an answer. That is a politically savvy move. That is a politically savvy post. That is not a disagreement with Joe Kent. That doesn't mean that there's any daylight between them. And as far as I understand, the two of them actually have a pretty close working relationship. I would not be surprised if Tulsi Gabbard had to leave at some point in the near future, or I would not be surprised if her sticking around because she thinks there is still a nominal ability to resist and do change. She doesn't want to give up that chair to somebody else. I don't know what the answer is. We'll watch it. That's a savvy and intelligent post, for whatever it's worth. Guys, if you're just watching right now and you like what you're hearing, even if you don't like what you're hearing, actually, if this is interesting and it's making you think, if it challenges you, like on Rumble, like on YouTube, subscribe to the channels. We'd appreciate that. Listen over on Spotify if you're listening in the replay. If you've never seen the video, if you want to actually see the receipts that I'm showing on the screen, if you want to read the post for yourself, I put them on the screen. It's KyleSeraphinShow.com. We may play a Spotify ad here if they want to put one in. So we have that. Let's continue rolling forward. I find that to be really, really detestable, but the detestability of the political machine and calling it anti-Semitism is bizarre because I don't get it. I don't know where it comes from. Donald Trump was asked about it yesterday while he was in the middle of a press conference. Here's what he had to say.
Your director of national counterterrorism, Joe Kent, he just resigned today. He said he can't support your conflict with Iran. What's your reaction to that? And did you talk
Well, I read his statement. I always thought he was a nice guy, but I always thought he was weak on security, very weak on security.
Let me just stop that right there. I thought he was a nice guy, but he was weak on security. This is a man who did physical security, who spent time in some of the most difficult selections, the most rigorous physical activities you can do, and mental selections. Donald Trump thought he was weak, but up until like an hour before that statement, he was the director of the National Counterterrorism Center. So he was weak on security, but he was in charge of the National Counterterrorism Center? How does that even work? I know that's a false statement. Donald Trump picked someone that he thought was weak? Pathetic. Absolutely, that's an absolutely pathetic and gutless statement by the president.
I didn't know him well, but I thought he seemed like a pretty nice guy. But when I read his statement, I realized that it's a good thing that he's out, because he said that Iran was not a threat. Iran was a threat. Every country realized what a threat Iran was. The question is whether or not they wanted to do something about it. And many people, many of the greatest military scholars are saying for years that presidents should have taken out Iran because they wanted a nuclear weapon. They were, if we didn't do the attack, or if, I'll go a step further, if I didn't terminate the Iran nuclear deal given to us, one of the worst deals ever made by Barack Hussein Obama. Remember when they sent Boeing 757s over there, loaded with cash? Hundreds of millions of dollars. You would have been very happy. This was a wonderful, they sent hundreds of millions. People forget that. Does anybody remember? Right? You remember. Hundreds of millions of dollars in a Boeing 757. I think they had two of them.
There was hundreds of millions of dollars. He was weak. He was always a little weak. That's why I made him in charge of the National Counterterrorism Center. He was a little weak. He had 11 combat tours. He was a little weak. His wife was killed in a terrorist attack when he had young children. He was a little weak, but he made it into a Tier 1 special mission unit. He was a little weak. That's why he was at the CIA as a paramilitary officer. That's what everybody says about dudes who came out of the Ranger Battalion, was a Green Beret, worked at the activity. They're a little weak. Task Force Orange guys, they're a little weak. People who are willing to go into harm's way for 2 decades and lose a spouse and still continue into the fight and still get up in the morning and figure out how to soldier on. That's pretty weak. That's what everyone says. Here's Mike Glover's take on it. It's a post entitled A Real One. Again, I mentioned Mike Glover at the beginning for a reason. He said, I saw the post about Joe Kent, the director of National Counterterrorism Center. For people who don't know, Joe is a former Green Beret. He served in the intelligence community and now sits in a position where decisions like this carry real weight and real consequences. And I know Joe personally. We went through the Q course together. The Q course is the Special Forces selection process. He said, I can tell you from experience, Joe is not the kind of man who moves off emotion, politics, or public pressure. If it took time, it's because he was doing what serious men in serious positions are supposed to do, weighing facts, assessing reality, and making sure the decision was grounded in truth. I got the same information from people who've dealt with Joe a lot more than I have. So this rings true to me. But once the fact-finding is done, Joe is the kind of man who will be decisive. He spent his life in service. He understands duty. He understands sacrifice. After losing his wife, Shannon, in the same threat environment, he understands the cost of getting these things wrong at a level most people never will. And that kind of experience doesn't make a man reckless. It makes a man deliberate. And when the time comes, it makes him decisive. I don't claim to know every layer of the Israeli issue yet. It's complicated, and I'm doing the work to understand it before I speak on it publicly. But based on what I know, and based on the people I know in this administration, I don't believe this will be the last. And by that, I think he means the people leaving the administration. Serious men in serious positions right now. And when they have enough facts, they will act accordingly and put the country over their own interests. It would be in your own interest to just go along to get along and to just hang out. There is no reason to stay in a place where you cannot affect change. One of the comments that the Suspendables and I had in our little private chat yesterday was, thank God that he did not put us into a position to work for someone like Kash Patel, where we would be used in name, but only nominally, and would not have the actual ability to go fix the actual problems that happened in our former agency. And I cannot imagine standing in a Trump FBI, we'll put that in air quotes because it's not real. Imagine working in a Trump FBI and then thinking, yeah, I'm going to just go along to give them credibility. I'm going to lend my name and whatever weight I bring to the problem, even though they're not solving the problem properly. No chance. I'd be out. I got no problem with Joe Kent leaving. And I'm also seeing the people that do have a problem with it. Do you remember the outrage when Dan Bongino resigned? Anyone? Does anyone remember the smear tactics on Dan Bongino from his own party? You remember how Fox News said he was a coward and a leaker and a loser? Do you remember how Donald Trump said he was weak and he couldn't do the job and that he was always not a great choice? Do you remember any of those things? Oh, they never happened. Nobody ever smeared Dan Bongino for walking away, who walked away far sooner and is a far less serious person. A far less serious person, which is probably why he has a spot on Fox News. A place that fired him, hired him again as a consultant to come in and be their contributor. Now, those of us that are out there that called him out for what he did, that's different. We are not in places of institutional power. The institution has mobilized to go after Joe Kent. And it is using people that left the administration so they could have a bigger, sloppier, knob-slobbing voice. Here's Bonino on Fox and Laura Ingraham last night. Again, I get embarrassed for Laura Ingraham every single time I see this. I think she's smarter than this. But I also think that she gets paid to keep her mouth shut. And if you want to get the paycheck, you show up and you do this crap. We're not trying to slander Joe Kent's service. We're just saying he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. Sure, bro.
Dan, now we've seen this before, right? And it's usually people who are really have gone hard left on everything. George Conway, Liz Cheney, John Bolton, John Kasich. The list goes on and on. You turn on Donald Trump and they embrace you for a time.
Yeah, this is the whose ox is gored effect. I mean, I've seen it with me during, my tenure in the administration, where they'll pick some right-wing radio host or podcaster they hate, who they call the conspiracy theorist or a nut job. And the minute he says something against someone they hate, Donald Trump or, in my case, me, they'll be like, respected voice in the conservative movement. They do this all the time. You're going to see this with Joe Kent in the coming days. Listen, Joe's decorated history of service is beyond reproach, and his sacrifice with his family is just unspeakable. I don't even like to think about it.
His wife, who passed,
however,
who was killed.
Yeah, I mean, her name is emblazoned on a plaque in a facility I can't really talk about. And when you read the story there, it's a tough story to read. But, again, as I've said with other, the sacrifice is beyond reproach. That doesn't mean that this current opinion is any more fact-based, because it's not. I'm really sorry, Laura. I mean, I read probably a lot more intelligence than he did, because they don't have a law enforcement function, the National Counterterrorism Center. They're an analytical clearinghouse. They're valuable. However, I had access to just about everything. And how you could come to the conclusion that the Israelis did it and there was no imminent threat here? Really? What about the anti-ship ballistic missiles, the drone program, 440 kilograms of 60% enriched nuclear material, their constant death to America chance? I mean, that's called evidence.
Is that what it's called, Dan? It's called evidence. Did you just say that you had more access to intelligence than someone who worked at ODNI when you had a law enforcement function? You think that counterterrorism is a law enforcement primarily focused entity? Nah, it's not. You had less experience in the realm by a lot. You spent 12 years talking, 13 years out of government. Your primary job in the previous government role was that you were doing executive protection, holding doors, doing site surveys, looking at threats in a physical place for a few seconds, not threat landscape pictures that are going on. But yeah, let's go on with that. And by the way, did you notice how much cognitive dissonance both Laura and Dan Bongino showed on that one? Because they couldn't stop. They had to make sure that they acknowledged the sacrifice and that they couldn't even fathom how difficult it was. And then they went out there to say that we knew more things than you. I'm sorry. The deputy director of the FBI does not have a bigger picture of what the counterterrorism threat, when the world's leading sponsor of counterterrorism is Iran. You think that you had a better picture of what the freaking intelligence case looked like against Iran? There is zero chance about that. Not to mention, Dan Bongino, on a regular basis, we were briefed on it. We were getting it from people that were inside the building. He wasn't even there. The stuff that he's talking about, you can't read in those places. He was doing tours and doing bench presses in freaking Phoenix, Arizona, and doing shitty speeches to people that were FBI agents that didn't believe what he had to say. So for the Fox News audience that lapped this crap up, he talked about the drone program and their short-range ballistic missiles. How about this? How about we talk about what the White House secretary said? Because she was a little bit upset that people might consider that Iran was a physical threat. Oh, why? Because there was a story about the FBI and Iranian drone attacks in California. We covered it last week. Do you guys recall? ABC News, NBC News, all the big news players started covering that story 2 weeks after the Iran war kicked off. And it was based on 2-week-old information saying that the FBI had got an unsubstantiated report that there was going to be some sort of drone. There was going to be a drone strike in California. Well, let's see here. That would be like a threat to the homeland, right? Like an Iranian threat to the homeland. Let me just read this. This is a post from the White House press secretary. This post and story should immediately be retracted by ABC News for providing false information to intentionally alarm the American people. Well, what side are we on here now, Carolyn Levitt? They wrote this based on one email that was sent to local law enforcement in California about a single unverified tip. You mean there wasn't an imminent threat to America? Interesting. Okay. The email even states that the tip was based on unverified intelligence, and yet ABC News left this critical fact out of their story. Why? Did that threat assessment going to local law enforcement come from ODNI, from the National Counterterrorism Threat Center? Oh, it didn't? It came from the FBI where Dan Bonino worked, that seems to get things wrong all the time and doesn't seem to have any ability to actually disrupt terrorism that is not creating itself? Got it. She wrote this, to be clear, quote, no such threat from Iran to our homeland exists, and it never did. So I don't know what drones you're talking about, but I know that the short-range ballistic missiles weren't going to be there. They weren't going to be a threat to us. It's nauseating to see this stuff. It really is. It makes me want to puke. Let's do some self-praise by Kash Patel, who's gone out there as well. And he's out there fighting for his job, as far as I can tell. Looks like his job is to make sure that everyone understands that they are out there destroying the terrorist threat and they're going after the criminals. I'm probably going to pause this clip a couple times. Also, notice he can't even pronounce the word criminal. I don't know why he can't do that, but sometimes when you're lying, it's hard to get ahead of yourself and you end up saying things that don't make sense. Here we are talking about the counterintelligence, counterterrorism threat that is being, quote unquote, crushed by the FBI. We've reviewed each one of these stories individually in December. You guys can go back and watch the shows if you like. Every one of these plots were invented by the FBI, furthered by the FBI, created by the FBI, and then, quote unquote, disrupted, which is a fake term, which means they went and did a takedown of a group that never had the mechanics to actually do the thing that they wanted to do. Having aspirations of terrorism is not the same as being able to operate as a terrorist. And by the way, you know how real terrorists work? They go and they run down people in New Orleans and they get away with it. Or they go and shoot somebody, even though they were arrested by the FBI in 2017 and convicted in 2017 for put in jail for 11 years. They go out and shoot an ROTC professor at Old Dominion because real terrorism actually gets through because the FBI didn't create it, so they can't stop it. Here's Kash Patel saying nonsense.
We had a record-setting year because we had 34,000 violent offenders to arrest because the prior administration flooded America's streets with criminals.
Criminals. They got them with criminals. Sounds like Bobby Sauce right there. Yeah. That 34,000 violent offenders, those are words that you made up because they're just people who were arrested on ICE raids. That doesn't mean they were all violent offenders. Doesn't mean that some of them were not. I'm just saying.
Criminals. And what we need to focus on is how do we stop terrorist attacks like we did? This FBI stopped 4 attacks in this past December alone, from a sweeping bombing campaign in Southern California.
There was a sweeping bombing campaign in Southern California. Can anyone substantiate that? Oh, no bombs were dropped. They were doing a chemical picnic out in the middle of the Mojave Desert, and like 2/3 of the people that were out there were involved with the FBI. What was it, like 40%? There was a meeting of 5 people, and 2 of the freaking people were FBI undercover and FBI informant. Give me a break. A sweeping bombing campaign. That never happened because there was no bombs because they didn't have the ability. They wrote the plan on a piece of paper and then they got arrested for the plan. That's what we're talking about here.
To an ISIS mass casualty event in Pennsylvania.
There was a mass casualty event from ISIS? Oh, there wasn't? There was none of these things? None of these things happened, people. He's actually talking about the fantasies in some guy's head. They're convicted for the idea that they thought they could get something done, and they made the mistake of telling an FBI informant or an FBI agent. Not real, a.k.a. the CT playbook.
To a North Carolina man who was ISIS-inspired that wanted to shoot tons of people on New Year's Eve.
How many people did he shoot, Kash? Oh, none? How many people? How do you know he wanted to shoot tons of people? Because you guys told him to shoot tons of people, and then you got him out there to go do that? Ah, good. Cool.
That's just 4 in the month of December. Before that, we stopped the Pumpkin Day plot where multiple individuals in multiple jurisdictions wanted to.
Guys, there was going to be a Pumpkin Day plot, which also didn't happen.
Shoot people on Halloween. And just last week, 9 individuals were convicted of following and supporting a material terrorist organization in Antifa.
So the 9 people that were convicted, the Antifa people, they shot somebody, didn't they? They shot people at an ICE facility. So they actually carried out their terrorist plot, and you didn't prevent it because the FBI doesn't prevent terrorism. If anyone thinks they do, you're nuts. And if you think that FISA should be renewed because of it, you're also nuts. We're going to talk about that in a second.
Antifa. So there's lots of crime, unfortunately, out there, and this FBI is after it.
There's lots of crime out there, and unfortunately, the FBI, I thought you guys were crushing crime. How could there be crime? You guys already solved murder last year. Like I read the headlines. Murder solved by the FBI, which doesn't investigate murder. Are we serious right now? No, that's the whole point. We are a decidedly unserious nation. We have unserious people giving us unserious slop, And they're also not interested in giving you any evidence on it. There's no evidence whatsoever. I used to listen to Ben Shapiro. I'm not even ashamed of it. I think Ben Shapiro is a brilliant person. I also think he is deeply disingenuous right now. Deeply. And he would know himself that if he was out there debating himself, because I've seen him debate college kids, obviously, but yeah, I've seen him debate. If we were going to look at Ben Shapiro, he would dismantle this version of Ben Shapiro. Because he's using things like brain rot and feelings. There is zero fact in here. Calling something a conspiracy without actually proving that, like, hey, here's why it is. This is the evidence of actually what was done. This is the background on this information. Here's what was actually proven. This is how we can debunk these statements. Yes, you cannot debunk things that, like, the unprovable, like I make an allegation, like, you know, Seraphin is actually a Martian. And you're like, well, I'll prove that you're not from Mars. It's like, what are you talking about? My birth certificate's probably not going to do it for you, right? Like, those are nonsensical. But if someone says that there's an Israeli push to start this war, and then you look and all the pro-Zionistic voices from Glenn Beck to Mark Levin to Ben Shapiro to Laura Loomer, etc., are all behind it, and the Lindsey Grahams who would stand with Israel and he'll leave you, when all these people, and then you get Mitch McConnell, who formerly was somebody in an august position in the Senate, tells you that mentioning Israeli intelligence makes you an anti-Semite. I know you're full of crap. Enjoy.
Well, this morning, Joe Kent quit his job at the National Counterterrorism Center and issued a scathing letter designed to undermine President Trump.
Prove that. That's a claim, and there's no substantiation behind it. And he would know that. Designed to do an undermining of Donald Trump. You have to actually prove that, because you're making an allegation now. Maybe he's also just pointing out why he's not going to be there, and those are his principles. And that's an equally reasonable position. Here we go.
The letter is deeply, deeply conspiratorial. It
claim, no fact.
States openly that, quote, Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation, and it is clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby.
Okay, that's what he said. Are you going to address the claims of imminency, or that there was a push and a misinformation campaign that was pushed on? Are we going to do that?
Now, that is conspiracy trash.
Dismissed, not addressed.
It's also kind of strange, since President Trump has said that it's conspiracy trash. So apparently, Trump
isn't this the same guy that was a never Trumper? Got it.
So deeply, deeply enthralled to those strange, powerful American lobbies. We're not going to say it. That he apparently has been so bamboozled by them that he's still under the impression that he's his own man. But here's the thing. President Trump is his own man.
There's no evidence that Donald Trump is his own man. I'll give you great examples of it. We had Chris Wray as an FBI director, did we not? For the entirety of Donald Trump's first term, and then also for Biden's term, and then for the beginning, he left right before Trump came in again. Who picked that guy? You think it was Donald Trump that picked him? He didn't even know who he was. He came because Chris Christie gave him to him. He came in because he was the Bridgegate fixer for the former governor of New Jersey, and he was friendly with Chris Christie and trying to consolidate power and friendship inside the GOP. Donald Trump picks people all the time that he ends up firing because he doesn't know what he's doing. You think that's a person who's his own man? That's not a person who's his own man. He's winging it. He just told you that he has to ask Susie Wiles for permission, even if he's being cutesy about it. Does he talk like that about anybody else? No. He's his own man. So saith Ben Shapiro.
His own decisions. And as per our usual arrangement, Trump's critics are cowards who are simply unwilling to acknowledge that Trump is the one making the call.
You just called a man who has done more hard things in a weekend than you've physically ever done in your entire life, who spilt blood for this country, a coward, and he lost his wife over it from a comfortable studio in Tennessee or Florida, wherever the hell he lives. This is the most pathetic smear campaign by weak people. And I'm just saying, as we continue to go on with it, and also, you guys are loving the eyebrows. None of it matters. All I want to say is if you make a claim and you can't back it up, you have zero things to substantiate what you're saying, and you're just doing a monologue that somebody else wrote for you. And I've gotten more and more aware of the fact that somebody is writing all this stuff. These are very scripted. He's a great speaker because he writes very well off this script. This is crap.
But Joe Kent continued, quote, early in this administration, high-ranking Israeli officials and influential members of the American media deployed a misinformation campaign that wholly undermined your America First platform and sowed pre-war sentiments to encourage a war with Iran. This echo chamber was used to deceive you into believing that Iran posed an imminent threat to the United States and that should you strike now, there was a clear path to a swift victory. This was a lie and is the same tactic the Israelis used to draw us into the disastrous Iraq war that cost our nation the lives of thousands of our best men and women. Again, the idea here seems to be that President Trump is a moron, misled into war by nefarious Israelis and unnamed influential members of the American media. Don't say it.
So we've just now claimed that his statement, which has every possibility of being factually true, means that Donald Trump is a moron. We're going to downplay the capabilities and the sophistication of a country that did a long-term campaign to be able to put pagers in all of their enemies' hands by buying up the supply chain and working the entire world, like the global logistics chain, to be able to make sure that 10 years later they could send out a single page and kill like 1,200 people? You think that's a group of people who are deceived? Like they only deceive morons, only a fool would be deceived by that? Is that what we're trying to say? And you're trying to say that a guy like Joe Kent doesn't have the ability to perceive what intelligence looks like and understand what he's dealing with. Guys, you want a little quick primer? Just go Google it. Intelligence Support Activity, also known as ISA, also known as the activity, sometimes referred to as Task Force Orange. Go get a little look at some of the tier 1 units that hide back there behind these names that you've never heard of. Most of you that are not military minded, who have never spent any time around the special operations community, you don't even know this exists. That's how secretive they are. You know what they do? Let's do an AI read, see how close they got to it. Key aspects of the Intelligence Support Activity. ISA, often called Task Force Orange or the Activity, is a highly secretive U.S. Tier 1 special operations unit under JSOC. Established in 1981 following the failed Iran hostage rescue, Operation Eagle Claw, its primary purpose is to conduct clandestine pre-mission intelligence gathering HUMINT and SIGINT to support elite units like Delta Force and SEAL Team 6. So wait a minute. He was doing the physical version of gathering intelligence. HUMINT is like source collection and turning people like a spy. And SIGINT is doing actual, collection of technical platforms, phones, satellite, comms, stuff like that. ISA serves as a strategic intelligence enabler for JSOC, specializing in undercover, ground-up reconnaissance efforts to locate high-value targets. Known for operating in the quote-unquote shadows, the unit gathers human intelligence, HUMINT, and signals intelligence in hostile environments, often utilizing aliases like Gray Fox, Center Spike, Task Force Orange. They were involved in operations against, Faram Adid in Somalia, tracking Pablo Escobar. It's primarily selected from elite members of Green Berets and other units. They undergo rigorous training in clandestine espionage, undercover HUMINT gathering, and advanced signals intelligence techniques. Ben Shapiro knows, though. He knows more about it than you do. He knows more about it than Joe Kent, who spent time doing this. I'm just saying the man spent time in the trenches doing the physical thing, and then he got to sit in a leadership role. And if he's saying something, we should at least look at it and say, does this hold weight? Is this person in a position, and does he have access to information to be able to make a factual statement about these things? Would you think? It makes me really sick to watch some of these people go out there and do this game. It really does. Here's what Joe Kent said about Iran. I'm just going to keep doing this because, here's what he said to Tucker Carlson, who he's accused of leaking to. No idea what he would have leaked to him. If he was leaking something that was going to be involved in espionage, if he was leaking something that was national defense information, you could very easily prosecute. Is that happening? Despite the screams of Laura Loomer? No, it is not happening. At least not yet.
Let me just ask you one last question, because he called it 60 years ago. You referred to what a war with Iran would do to the United States. And I don't know that a lot of people in this country fully understand what Iran is as a nation state. It's not Afghanistan. What do you think the immediate and then longer term effects of a war with Iran would be on the United States?
Immediately, it would be very bloody. I have no doubt that we could probably defeat some of their air defense and go in there and have another shock and awe campaign. But again, we saw how the shock and awe campaign in Iraq really didn't actually work in the long run. So I have no doubt that we'd have some immediate results that people would cheer about here in the United States. But Iran Persia has always been an empire. It's been around longer than any of the other players in the modern Middle East right now, and they are not going anywhere. And right now, Iran has a lot of internal problem. They have a lot of internal strife with the Ayatollah and that government that's only been in power since 1979. But again, if we start conducting strikes in Iran, everyone in Iran will rally around their leader, and they will become even more revolutionary. And then we will have Iranian proxies throughout the entire region that will be conducting attacks just like we had in Jordan. And really, in the long term, Tucker, the axis that has been built really since Putin invaded Russia, and we decided that since Putin invaded Ukraine, and we decided we were going to throw this massive sanctions package at them, China has come in as a major player, and we are deeply compromised by China. They control a lot of our economy. They control global manufacturing. They're deeply embedded in Wall Street, and they've also made deals with the Iranians. They want access to Iranian petro, not to mention the fact that Biden killed off U.S. energy independence, and now he's going after LNG, and the world's biggest LNG exporters are Iran, Russia, and Qatar. So this axis would become very powerful. If we get deeply involved and deeply entangled with Iran, we are playing right into China's hands, because China would like nothing more than for us to be committing our military industrial base to a war in Eastern Europe, in Ukraine, and then to be committing our conventional military power, our blood and our treasure, back in the Middle East. That will make the Pacific, our actual border, extremely vulnerable to Chinese aggression. Or China will simply just watch us bleed out economically as we bleed out on the battlefield on these couple different theaters. It's absolute insanity. It's opening up Pandora's box. And again, for what gain to the American people?
I mean, I think that's the most reasonable, common sense based, factual assessment I've seen of this from anyone.
That might be hyperbolic, but I don't think it's that far off. You guys find that to be someone who is deeply conspiratorial? Is that what that sounded like? Because that's not what it sounded like to me. It sounded like he said that we shouldn't be doing a ground war in Iran and that tactical strikes was the right answer. Here's something interesting. This is the New York Times. Netanyahu hopes that strikes on Iran will lead to uprising and regime change. Israeli attacks have targeted the command centers of Iran's oppressive and the internal security forces in hopes that Iranians will overthrow their leaders. Some see that as wishful thinking. Do you know how I know it's wishful thinking? Because it's not happening. I read the news every single day. Every single day. There is not a single report that Iranians are taking to the streets to take back their own government. In fact, all it seems to do is be hardening people, because at least some people there wanted to have the regime that they had. And if they wanted to overthrow it, they would have been responsible for doing it themselves. I did see that Israel is stepping up its attacks in Lebanon and some other places. They're throwing bombs into other places. Fine. I'm also seeing that our allies throughout Europe are not interested in jumping in with us. And some of that has to do with something my wife brought up and George Hill brought up, incidentally. When my wife and George Hill both tell me the same thing, I feel like I should bring it up to you guys. There are massive, unassimilated Muslim populations throughout Europe in almost all those countries. And if you were to go pick a fight in the Middle East, if you're Germany, if you're France, if you're Italy, and you want to come to the aid of the United States, who are you going to piss off that's in your country that you don't have control of? Forget the idea of like Iranian sleeper cells in the United States, because we have such a vast terrain. We have such a huge number of military veterans from the global war on terror over the last 25 years. Like, you're just not going to be able to see massive European style uprisings of Muslims. It just won't happen. There may be places like Dearborn, Michigan. There may be places that are taken over, like Little Somalia up in Mogadishu or whatever up in Minnesota. Sure. But when you look at what Europe has, they're much more concentrated. They have much larger unassimilated populations, and you're dealing with something where you could have a population revolt and you could lose control simply by doing something in foreign policy. You've noticed that hasn't happened here. And even if many of the Muslim populations that are in the United States or even in Europe are not necessarily sympathetic to what goes on in Iran, they believe in a different version of Islam, so be it. Starting that problem in the Middle East and getting entrenched in that inevitably is going to have consequences for them domestically that they don't want to play with. And again, Israel's thinking that you're going to see a regime change happen. You know, I don't think it's going to happen. We're 19 days in. Where's the regime change? 19 days is more than enough time for people who are sitting there and plotting revolution to start their revolution knowing that this is a continued campaign. It doesn't seem like it's working. There are voices that are aggressively going after Joe Kent. And anybody who says anything related. Joe Kent is just the next in the line of Tucker Carlson is an anti-Semite and he should be prosecuted for FARA violations. Now it's Joe Kent. He was a leaker. He was always a traitor to the Trump administration. I hired him to be in charge of the National Terrorist Screening Center or the National Terrorist Counterterrorism Center because he was weak, Donald Trump. Donald Trump hires people that he knows are weak. They were always a little weak. That's why I hired them to be in charge of something that is so important if you believe what they're saying. Actually, Harrison Smith over at InfoWars had a pretty good take on this stuff. It's kind of how I feel about these doughy, pudgy, weak, like foreign-aligned human beings. Again, switch out Israel for any other country. If you saw a massive campaign about allegiance to Uganda in this country by people who are American citizens, you'd be like, what in the actual hell is going on? Uganda's a great example because I know people from Uganda. I went to school with people from Uganda, and they were wonderful people. Like, I really liked them. The people that I've met from Uganda have been awesome. I know people from Ghana, too, and they were super nice. If you went out there as an American congressman, as an American senator, or as an American president and said that, you know, we must do everything we can to defend Ghana, people would go, what are you talking about? So that foreign aligned thing, it actually does hit home. And again, the mirror test is worth doing every single time. Just switch out that word for another country and see if it makes any sense to you. Here's Harrison Smith.
Good luck, Mark Levin. You know, good luck, Ben Shapiro. Good luck, you subversive foreign traitors. Good luck trying to make Joe Kent look like he's anti-Semitic or whatever other claim you could just make them all. Doesn't matter. We know what is really going on. Joe Kent understands foreign policy. He understands the consequences, not just strategically at the national level, but at the personal level, as after all, his wife died serving overseas while their children were still very young. And you can't imagine the amount of suffering this man has been through for the sake of his patriotism. And again, this is why, like we're talking about this the whole time, this is why it's important. There may be, you know, Tucker Carlson was a great example, right, of the type of person that Mark Levin hates, that Laura Loomer hates, an American patriot Christian who just says the truth. And like, that's enough, right? That's enough to make him enemy number one. He should be killed. They think he should die because he's not willing to compromise his own morals for their, aggressive expansion of their ethno-state. Joe Kent might be even better. Joe Kent might be even more of a fantastic example and comparison to put up to the likes of Mark Levin. Why are these pudgy, soft, rage-filled, psychotic foreigners have more power than patriotic Americans who have put their lives on the line for the United States?
And called me crazy, but what are they doing? I want to know what people are actually going to do. My life is ruined. Does anybody understand how ruined my life is? I'm sick of it. I don't want to listen to people tell me that I'm a conspiracy theorist. They don't know what it's like to be me. My life is ruined, Alex.
Oh, that was Laura Loomer talking to Alex Jones when she had an epic crash out because her life was ruined because she got deplatformed from a bunch of places. And Laura Loomer has never had a real job. Never. Not once. For what I do right now, I've been deposed about what I do here as a podcaster. This is not a real job, people. If you think it is, you're a crazy person. It means you don't know what a real job is. I've done real jobs. I've done jobs that got blood on my hands. I've done jobs that left me with my feet aching. I've worked in restaurants. I've worked physical and manual labor. I did boring jobs where I was crunching numbers and putting together millions of dollars worth of revenue recognition for movie studios, where like what I did had a massive impact on the bottom line of what we could actually account for, accounting jobs, things like that, finance. I worked for the FBI, which was kind of not a real job. It's kind of fun. Especially sitting in a car, like talking on a radio, minimal paperwork. That was kind of fun. It was less of a real job. It was more like what I do today. I was accountable to very few things. Laura Loomer's crying because she's never gone out and gotten a real job. Not once. I used to run restaurants. That's a seriously real job. Serving other people on your feet for 12 to 18 hours a day to the point where I literally had migraines. And I drove home with cigarette smoke still on my body, puking out of my car because my brain hurt so much and my eyes were like throbbing like I wasn't going to make it with like a neurological migraine. And I still got up the next day, 4 hours, 5 hours later, and went back into work and opened the damn restaurant again. And we started serving breakfast. And I was running line cooks and dishwashers and people that were waiting tables. Like you jump in and bartend at the same time as you're out there dealing with the guy who's pissed off because his burger wasn't cooked right. I've done all that. You think any of these people have done these things? No. Mark Levin. Pudgy, doughy, foreign aligned. At least we're not a country that is serving this other weird country's stuff, right? Listen, you can look at it all the time. Somebody said, how come we don't talk about the fact that Israel is our aircraft carrier in the Middle East? Do you know how many agreements we have with foreign nation states where their pilots and their fighters come to the United States? How many of you have ever worked on Joint Base Lackland like I did, where you go over to the foreign bizarre chow hall and you've got nothing but people wearing foreign military uniforms with huge beards, dudes holding hands with each other, and you see all the Middle Easterners that we are training to fly our equipment overseas. We got a lot of allies in the Middle East. It's not just Israel, and we could lean on them at any time, whether it be the Saudis, whether it be UAE. There's a bunch of places, Qatar and so on. We have a ton of those people coming over here. You think that that's the only option we have is Israel? At least we're not sending Mike Huckabee over there to be the Israeli ambassador to America.
Mr. Prime Minister, I wanted you to know the president asked me to come and make sure you were okay.
Yes, Mike. Yes, I'm alive.
I checked that, and I'm happy to see that. But he wanted to make sure because, you guys get along too well.
I know, and we shake hands with 5 fingers in each hand. But I have to tell you, I'm alive, but I have this card.
Oh.
And don't read it. So it's a punch card. Mm-hmm. Today I erased 2 names on the punch cards, and you see how many more to go on this batch.
You know what the good news is? My name is not on the punch card.
Your name is on the list of the good guys.
Thank you.
And what the president, the U.S. forces are doing is incredible. We're very proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with them. And getting rid of these lunatics who would like to develop nuclear weapons and the means to deliver them to every American city.
Wait a minute. I thought they had nuclear weapons or they were going to develop them. You guys, when I tell you that politics is show business for ugly people, that was the shittiest acting you've ever seen. That was Bibi Netanyahu, and that was the ambassador from America, theoretically, to Israel, Mike Huckabee, doing a staged, poorly constructed, weird video where it went out on social media where the Israeli prime minister is showing him a freaking hit list. You know what that was? These are the people on the list that we're going to go kill next, and you're not on this list, so you're good. You're one of the good guys. You're the good guys. We don't kill the good guys because you do what we want. We stand shoulder to shoulder for the nukes. Did Donald Trump also admit yesterday that nukes are in the possession of Israel? Because we've never had a U.S. president actually admit that out loud. We kind of all assume that Israel's a nuclear power, but nobody will ever make an official comment. Pretty sure Donald Trump just actually dropped the ball on that one, too.
He also warned that if the conflict escalates, Israel may contemplate the use of a nuclear weapon. Has he shared that assessment with you?
No, yes. And Israel wouldn't do that. Israel would never do that. And, there's a theory. You pounded them to hell, and you can just leave now, and it'll take 10 years for them to build back not nearly what they have right now. And I guess that's another theory, but we want...
He almost said Israel wouldn't use nukes. Whoops. But he definitely just answered the question they don't have those. He was like, they would never use them. One more time.
He also warned that if the conflict escalates, Israel may contemplate the use of a nuclear weapon. Has he shared that assessment with you?
No, yes. And Israel wouldn't do that. Israel would never do that. And
Israel would never use nukes that they have, that I'm not supposed to say that they have because we have an agreement that we wouldn't ever tell them that they used it. Oh, boy. Okay, cool. So that just happened. But Joe Kent's weak. Guys, he's weak. All right? So I don't know what you guys are all talking about, but obviously he's weak. Let's talk about some of the weird things that are going to be going up. We're going to hit FISA real quickly because I think it's relevant. Actually, while you guys are still listening, or as you're sitting here, if you're still on Rumble and you haven't hit a like, make sure you do it. If you're listening on YouTube, I'd appreciate that. Subscribe to the channel if you want an alternative opinion from whatever the mainstream slop is that is thrown at you from Fox News. If you're somebody who has questions and you want a different perspective, that's what we do here. Coming up on 20,000 followers and growing quietly. But I'm happy to have you. Thank you for being there. And watch us over on KyleSeraphinShow.com if you guys want the replay. We'll play a Spotify ad if they want to do it. Right there. Okay. Let's do this. Let's do some headlines that were out there in the world because they're relevant. How about this? Okay. Rand Paul confronts Senator Markwayne Mullin at the DHS confirmation hearing. Markwayne Mullin, the senator from Oklahoma, the AKA scapegoat, is going to Oh, this is interesting. This was just updated a couple seconds ago, like while we were live. So I'll just read some of this stuff. But he's being questioned. He's being, questioned for his confirmation as the replacement for Kristi Noem in the Department of Homeland Security Secretary role. There was months of criticism about Kristi Noem, aka Border Barbie. She was kind of terrible. We are now 33 days into DHS shutdown, which is kind of funny. Rand Paul kicked off the hearing by challenging Mullen for allegedly calling him a freaking snake and claiming, I understand why his neighbor did that to him, which is talking about when Rand Paul's neighbor punched him. Mullen says, it sounds like you fight Republicans more than you work with us. Well, there's a really good reason to fight with Republicans. It's because Republicans don't actually deliver the things that you want. Am I wrong? Here's the 20 core promises to America. And just go ahead and look out there. Defend our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, and our fundamental freedoms, including the freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to keep and bear arms. Why don't we add there the freedom in the Fourth Amendment that you should not be subject to an unreasonable search and seizure by the government, that you should be safe in your person's place and things. Shouldn't you? And how about number 8, prevent World War III, restore peace in Europe and the Middle East? Wouldn't that be nice? What if we just did that? What if Republicans did the thing they were supposed to do? Well, they can't do that stuff. And Mullen's going to be a voice. I'm sure he's going to be a great voice talking about FISA. So I want to talk about that as well. Just a couple other quick little headlines as we run through them, and then we'll just get to it. There is no out. A lifeline, Red Sea lifeline for global oil is now at risk. This is a discussion that's over on CNN Business. I read this briefly. I'll actually give you a link to the archive version of it, and then you guys can read that over in the comments. If you guys want to see the alternative to the Strait of Hormuz is apparently going through the Red Sea, but it sounds like those things are under questions. Here you have the question about Tulsi Gabbard discussing the resignation of Joe Kent. So that was coming in from NBC as one of their top stories. CBS had top story on the same thing. New York Times, we went over it real briefly. Axios had 3 interesting things since we were talking about the American Israel lobby having outsized influence. Axios, which apparently is what Donald Trump reads morning, says they got a pro-Israel candidate in Cook County, Commissioner Donna Miller. Pro-Israel group notched some much-needed victories in Tuesday in Illinois. 2 Democratic House candidates that they were backing won their races. Kind of interesting. Then you have a story about how the top officials that were killed in Iran. I'll push that over there. This is stuff we talked about yesterday. This is also fun. Quick little story here, which I will archive and get over to you. But Mark Wayne Mullen's secret past in the war zone involved private security work in the Middle East war zones before running for Congress in 2012. 3 people have heard him discuss it. He talked about war as dirty and smelly, and there was a question about where that came from. It sounds like that's the backstory on it. And Trump foresees Iran endgame divide. Israel doesn't hate the chaos. Not exactly beating those allegations that are out there. Okay. I want to talk about FISA because FISA is something that's really important to me. Also, the SAVE Act or the Save America Act of securing our elections. If we don't have elections, then it doesn't really matter who's in office because those people were selected. And if we don't think that we can have free and fair elections, which is what most people that are in the Republican side and even just broadly speaking on the conservative right side think after 2020, if you guys think that 2020 was just an anomaly, it seems like it's more the rule. In fact, I would say 2024 is the anomaly that you got the person you wanted. And that was only because there was probably going to be violence in the streets if Donald Trump was not elected. I talked to people on the left that say the exact same thing. There needed to be something that happened. What if you imagined hitching American warrantless surveillance under FISA to the Save America Act because everyone has to vote for warrantless surveillance and they want to get it through clean? And that's literally what we're dealing with right now. This is why people like Tom Massie vote against these things, because they put poison in these bills where they're like, you're going to have to vote against America if you want to vote for America. This is how you end up with a Joe Kent walking out saying, I think that there are things that I could do that are good, but I cannot co-sign on this thing that is too evil for me to be part of. I will always side with somebody that votes their conscience, that stands up and says that there is a real problem with this one thing and doing some nominal good that also encourages the problem. Like, I don't make peace with evil. It's the reason why I never got the shots. And it's more importantly, why I never went along with the second thing. Do you guys remember the whole thing during COVID? They gave almost everybody a second choice, especially if you were in the federal government. This was my experience. And by the way, I'm still litigating a lawsuit against this DOJ, this FBI. We are currently dealing with that. We're going to go meet with them on Friday to discuss terms to see if they want to settle, even though they fired the guy that did the thing that we are suing them over. They always give you a second chance to bend the knee. They're like, hey, get the shot, otherwise you lose your job. And some of us were like, no, we're not going to do that. Many of you out there in the audience, we're not going to do that. And they said, fine, you're not going to get our shot? You need to put this up your nose every day and prove to us that you're safe. That's what you have to do. And you have to wear a mask so everyone knows that you're dirty. Call yourself out to everyone and go do this humiliation ritual. And a very few of us, very, very few of us, how many of you never took a test to prove that you were, an invasive test to prove that you didn't have COVID to nobody? Because that's me. The government said, you must test for COVID and upload a negative test every 72 hours. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. No, that's performative. That's bullshit. I've done thousands of nasal swabs when I worked as a paramedic in a hospital. I am not about to do one for no reason every other day. You're out of your damn minds. It's not going to happen. And they said, well, then you can't come in here. It's like, so be it. I won't go in there. They always add some poison thing. Do this thing. You say no. And they're like, well, we'll let you keep doing what you were doing before, but you also have to do this other thing for us. That's what this looks like when I see Anna Paulina Luna thinking she's making an argument that we should bond the Save America Act, the Voting ID Act, to FISA renewal.
Look, there's a number of Republicans in the House that will refuse to vote on any rule that has Senate legislation, meaning no Senate legislation will pass unless the Save America Act is something that the Senate will vote on. But look, Maria, as you are seeing now, you are seeing some of the more moderate Democrats getting squishy on this issue. And what I will say is that we actually, if we stick this on FISA, let's say that everything goes to hell in a handbasket in the Senate and we can't get anything done with the standing filibuster, then we can stick it on FISA. As you know, Maria, FISA is one of these must-pass pieces of legislation that the Senate would literally walk over broken glass in order to pass. And I believe this is how we're going to actually get it done. But it is unfortunate, everything that you're seeing with TSA, Chuck Schumer saying that they want to, defund ICE operations and stop it. We've already funded it until 2028, so they're just playing games at this point. And remember, voter ID is national security, and it's the number one way that we can protect our country.
So you're saying you want this attached to the legislation about redoing the FISA Act, is what you just said, but you also
Correct.
said recently that you are willing to do primary challenges against traitors. You call them traitors to the America First agenda, and you're even advocating for a convention of states to bypass uniparty swamp in D.C.
Yes, you've said it. That is me. That is my personal perspective. I think that we have some great House members, and there are a lot of these senators that say that they support the Save America Act, yet they don't want to talk to their leadership about the standing filibuster, and they won't put pressure on leadership to embrace it. That's really the one way.
Maybe we shouldn't have swimsuit models go and try to represent conservative positions, because what you just said is that we should allow for spying on Americans so we can get voter ID. I don't want the head of the cheerleading squad making decisions that serious people should be involved in. It'd be nice if maybe somebody understood a little bit about what was going on in that room. By the way, her claim, we're going to pass FISA clean, that's coming from Speaker Mike Johnson. That's what he said. I guess this was yesterday.
On FISA,
yeah.
Are you going to move a clean extension? Is that your plan?
My plan is to move a clean extension of FISA. As you know, FISA in Section 702 is responsible for the large measure of intelligence that we use to protect and keep Americans safe. It expires in April, and we're looking at that deadline, and hoping that we can get a clean authorization done for at least 18 months. Now, why would we go up for reauthorization? We instituted 56 substantive reforms to FISA. By every measure and review, those are working just as we planned. We've not had the abuses that were happening before those reforms, and everybody in Congress understands the necessity of ensuring that we keep the homeland safe, except for the Democrats, who, as you know, are choosing not to fund the Department of Homeland Security. One more.
Yeah, we're going to make this about something that it's not totally about. If you're allowing people to search through a national database that is collected by the NSA, and Americans are in it, and you don't need a warrant for it, then you are violating the Fourth Amendment. And being able to pass laws that make you feel good about it, unacceptable. FISA, we made it through almost all the Cold War without FISA. Let's hear what somebody says about it that used to be on the side that understood that there were problems with this thing called weaponized government. By the way, that was also in Donald Trump's 20 core promises. Wasn't there an issue before Smithers started groveling? I had this observation earlier today. Weak and stupid men surround themselves with people who tell them what they want to hear. Strong and intelligent men will find people that disagree with them on principle and help them understand that they can get to the right path. Iron sharpens iron, right? That kind of thing. What about people that say the right thing up until the time when they don't have to say the right thing?
The biggest concern I have going forward is the politicization and weaponization and creation of a two-tier system of justice as a result. Back when Devin Nunes and I ran the Russiagate investigation and exposed the FISA corruption, we recommended a slew of fixes so it never happen again. Unfortunately, Congress chose to allow 702 FISA to basically be reauthorized. What does that mean? What is 702? It's fancy for foreign intelligence surveillance. It means me as a former national security prosecutor and intelligence operative would go overseas and manhunt terrorists. That's what it's for. But the FISA court in April of 2022 publicized an opinion that said the FBI used it illegally 275,000 times domestically against Americans, 16 different occasions against those affiliated with January 6th, 19,000 times domestically against donors to a congressional campaign, and wait for it, 24,000 separate times against Americans and groups in and around January 6th. That FISA process has been turned on its head, redirected inwards, and anyone who says, oh, that's just a Republican conspiracy speak, that's the FISA court that rescinded Rod Rosenstein's illegal surveillance of Donald Trump twice based on our investigation, and now they do it again, and they prove the FBI and DOJ have weaponized justice, and the Republican leadership in Congress allowed it to be reauthorized, essentially through the next election cycle.
So wait, that was in 2024, and they found hundreds of thousands of abuses, and then they passed it through, but all of their reforms were done, but they weren't done. Did you notice how Patel called himself a former intelligence operative? That was kind of funny, too. He's always trying to, like, pad his resume. Yeah, that was Epstein's attorney that was on there, Alan Dershowitz. No big deal. Just hanging out there listening to this thing. Here's the deal. Really simply. There were hundreds of thousands of abuses after the reforms went in. To act like it's now fixed, FISA was not put in to find terrorists, you freaking clowns. It was expanded to include terrorists. It was put in because it's the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. It was simply meant to go after people, and FISA 702 was supposed to be a shortcut. It was a shortcut that was allowing you to look at foreign intelligence operatives who were not based in the United States, so you were never in any danger of violating anyone American's constitutional liberties. That was the entire idea of it. It turns out that's what it's used for, though. It is used to reverse target Americans. It's not fixed. It's just ours. It's not fixing and throwing the ring of power away. We're just going to use it for the good of Gondor, right up until the point where it corrupts all of us. This is why I'm a Tom Massie fan. Here's Charlie Kirk and Tom Massie, 2024.
What happened? What would cause somebody to flip from fighting hard in a committee to all of a sudden having the deciding vote as speaker? Was he an imposter all along?
I'm coming to that conclusion. I don't think his family's locked up in the basement somewhere, being tortured. Those claims are ridiculous. I don't even believe that he went in a skiff and learned something that we don't know, because I spent 3.5 hours in the skiff with Mike Johnson. Remember, I'm on the Judiciary Committee, and I got the same briefing he got from CIA, NSA, DOD, FBI, DNI, FISA judge. They were all in that skiff. It was actually a 4-hour meeting. After 3.5 hours, I said, this is enough. This is a waste of time. You haven't given us one example of where spying on Americans without a warrant was able to help you avert terrorism. They gave us hypotheticals, and then they gave us examples of how spying on foreigners overseas without a warrant was helpful. But they never gave us an example. So don't believe his story that he went to the skiff and he learned something. That's not true.
So wait, Mike Johnson got the same brief that Tom Massie did, and Tom Massie asked for evidence, and Mike Johnson went out and then pushed a vote and said, we're going to pass a clean FISA. We want to make sure we get the renewal. Did you hear what that was? Because it's pretty interesting. If you come in with your mind made up and your job is to back whatever it is that the intelligence community wants you to do, or you think that's what's required for your job, if they're not showing you any evidence and you've gone through it, that's a guy that sat in the same exact briefing, right? Here's where it comes back full circle. Yesterday, Mike Johnson was asked about Joe Kent after the resignation. And Joe Kent did exactly, Mike Johnson did exactly the same thing he did on FISA. He said Joe Kent was always a problem. I got those briefings. It turns out I would say that Joe Kent is a lot more like a Tom Massie, which is why I'll say I'm willing to hear what he has to say in that letter. And by the way, it wasn't virulently anti-Semitic. and it wasn't discounted. He said there was no imminent threat. If someone who spent his life around the idea of shoot or not shoot, collecting intelligence in a covert, clandestine manner, says that there's no imminent intelligence. By the way, I also see a misinformation op, and I don't think this war was justified, and I'm privy to all of it. And Mike Johnson says it does. If you have Mike Johnson on one side and Joe Kent on the other, I'm going to side with Joe Kent. I'm going to side with Tom Massie. I'm going to side with the people that are smarter, that have done things, than the slimy Smithers character that always suckles up to where power is. Here he is.
This morning, former Congressman Joe Kent.
They're talking about they called him former congressman. That's not even what he was. They're asking the question. So it's real quiet, so I'm just kind of talk over it here. But Johnson's about to explain what he saw and claim that he must not have been in the meetings.
He writes, Iran posed no imminent threat to our nature. It's clear that we started this war due to pressure.
Again, no imminent threats being brought up. Specific language.
How do you respond to that and to those other Republicans who say that...
How do you respond to other Republicans who say, yeah, this is a reasonable statement?
Well, that proposition at the end is clearly wrong. I'm on the Gang of Eight. I got all the briefings. We all understood there was clearly an imminent threat, that Iran was very close to the enrichment of nuclear capability, and they were building missiles at a pace that no one in the region could keep up with. They were far outpacing our allies and friends and us in our defense capability, because we had personnel, installations, members of the armed services, and civilians in the region. Iran was...
So nothing about nuclear weapons, nothing about a threat to the American homeland. They were outpacing the threats to our allies. You want to have like the credibility towards, oh, what was the danger here? And the danger was to Israel, and Israel was going to act, which is what Mike Johnson said previously, which is what Marco Rubio said previously, which is what Donald Trump said previously. These guys are all over the place. They're all over the place in their own words. It's not my words. And once again, it was very simple. There was a statement made about why Donald Trump was the president. He was the president of peace. He was peace incarnate. It was a domestic agenda. Why did you flip? You can't even get voter ID through our legislature. But you can stand behind an imminent threat that's not imminent. And nobody can say, like, do any of those things say imminence? No, they don't. They all say potential threat. Every single one of those things are potential. The word imminent is specific. And remember, Tulsi Gabbard didn't disagree.
Building up ballistic missiles at such a rapid pace, and we knew that their plan was to fire them upon Americans.
They were building up something at a rapid pace. That is not imminence. It's potential. It's the same reason why looking at Ashley Babbitt, she wasn't an imminent threat of death or serious physical injury. Many people saw that shooting, so I'll reference it real clearly. That's not an imminent threat if you poke your head through a window. If your hands show up with a weapon or you pop through it, you have the ability to become an imminent threat when you stick your head through the window, because the next step could be imminent, but it's not imminent. It's potential.
Chief and his administration had a very difficult decision to make. I don't know where Joe Kent is getting his information, but he wasn't in those briefings clearly, because...
Same story that Tom Massie said. I don't know where Mike Johnson came up with his information, because I was in the same briefing and I took away something else. Well, I would say that Joe Kent has a much deeper understanding of what a national security threat looks like than this soft man.
The Secretary of State, the Secretary of War, and everyone, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Kane, they had exquisite intelligence, and we understood that this was a serious moment for us. Had the president waited, I am personally convinced that we would have mass casualties of Americans, service members and others, and our installations would have been dramatically damaged.
This is called the unfalsifiable premise. If we hadn't have acted, something terrible would have happened. If you had pulled this information, if you stopped FISA, then we would have the next 9/11. God forbid you be the one responsible for the next 9/11. And because we spy on Americans, we can keep the next 9/11 from happening. All we have to do is sacrifice our liberty. This is the same argument from these people over and over again. And seeing it from people who've like never been sunburned from working out in the yard and have never actually taken a punch in the face by like a grown man. Like, I don't care what you think about damage. I don't care what you think about the potential of things when there's no realistic, it's never happened. That's how we know it wouldn't happen. Imminence means that you can see it coming. Imminence is a person is drawing a weapon and you shoot them. That's what imminent means. It's a very specific thing. We're getting Iraq war all over again. There's weapons of mass destruction. We're going to go find them. There's an imminent danger of chemical weapons, of nuclear weapons, of weapons of mass destruction. Are they out there? No. They must have moved them.
And so the president felt that he had to strike first to prevent those mass casualties. That's a summary. I can't tell you the classified part, but that's the summary that's made public, and it's...
That's Dan Bongino tactic. Just trust me, bro. It's trust me and bro consulting going here.
Accurate, yeah. Monitor.
I don't believe any of these people. They're polished liars. They're show business for ugly people. Some of them are better actor than others. Mike Huckabee, crappy actor. Bibi Netanyahu, crappy actor. Mike Johnson, slightly better actor. Actors nonetheless. Just nasty. It's just nasty to watch it. And it does make me sick hearing it. Because what they're doing is they have to smear somebody else to be able to do it. You guys want one more example of it? You want one more example of how awesome this administration is? This is our administration. We're getting the truth now. How about I go and pretend to be something? I'm just a regular, folksy, suburban mom with some kids who just also happens to be married to the deputy chief of staff at the White House. And I just happen to get every single person in the Trump administration sitting on my couch and do puff piece interviews. I was a Pizzagate person, but then it was debunked, and that's why I'm not part of it anymore. Let's have Katie Miller talk to Todd Blanche, who, as far as we can understand it, was the one who signed off on shutting down the Epstein investigation. Let's go debunk all of that stuff real quick. Can we just do that? We're in the middle of a world where we might even be fighting a freaking war in Iran over the debacle of the Epstein file release. It's already been debunked, people. I didn't debunk it. Law enforcement did, nebulously, whatever that means. The ones that we've proven couldn't actually be honest about anything, that can't get their act together for FISA, that I'm now 120 days deep into a 30-day turnover period, and they have no estimate of when it's going to happen. Those people that are going to be so transparent, that lie to you about every single terrorist attack that happens because they made them all up, those people are going to be transparent? Cool. This is totally not like a limited hangout situation.
As I've said, I'm the biggest conspiracy theorist you'll ever find. So when the
Listen, I mean, you guys all know she said that before, right? Because that's what Katie Miller is known for. She's known for being the biggest conspiracy theorist ever. That's why she was sitting barefoot with high heels on or whatever. She was sitting with high heels on her couch. And she did a puff piece with Kash Patel and the girlfriend who never touched each other the whole time.
As I've said, I'm the biggest conspiracy theorist you'll ever find. So when the Epstein story exploded, people online immediately connected it to the Pizzagate conspiracy theory about elite child trafficking rings. Did investigators check for any connection between Epstein and the Pizzagate controversy?
Well, when you say did investigators track, the Pizzagate conspiracy theory has been debunked repeatedly by law enforcement, not by me, by law enforcement. And I know that there's been a fair amount of searches around those certain terms.
Sure, it was totally debunked. And then you look at what happened with Epstein, where a wealthy, well-connected man was actually trafficking underage girls in elite circles. And then you begin to think, maybe things aren't a real conspiracy theory.
Well, but again, the only thing we can do in a conspiracy theory, Katie, is investigate. Okay, so it's easy to say on X or to say, I think there's an issue here, but how do we, let's investigate. So we investigated all the times that the certain buzzwords associated with Pizzagate were in the Epstein files, and you can do the same thing. And users
I've read all the pages.
And many of those, at least as far as my understanding is of the conspiracy theory, don't line up with the conspiracy theory at all.
Just so we're all on the same page right now, and just so you guys heard what I heard, she said she's read all the pages of the 3 million files, or just the ones that mentioned pizza. I don't know, but there was like hundreds of times it was mentioned, so maybe she read all those pages. The second thing is she made a definitive statement that Jeffrey Epstein was a man trafficking young girls in elite circles. She made that claim, and Todd Blanche didn't debunk it, which is hilarious. But we're now going to debunk Pizzagate because it's already been debunked. This is claiming something that has been done because it's already been done. That's how it was done. We all knew it was done because it was already done, because it was done.
If all of them, frankly. But so I'm not sure. I am aware that the word pizza is in the Epstein files, among other things.
Does a client list exist? Does an Epstein client list exist, and is the government in possession of it?
No, I mean, listen, everything, I could ask you the same question, right? Because everything's been released. So
everything has not been released. We should have like a narrator fact check.
There's what's commonly referred to as the client list, if I were speculating, is the black book that has been released for years and years and years that was basically Epstein's address book. There was a list of masseuses. It's not a client list, obviously. A lot of those women were actually victims. That exists, but I don't even, to be honest with you, I don't know what a client list is, and I'm not trying to be naive, but what would a client list consist of? You mean a list of Mr. Epstein's, the people he was supposedly blackmailing? Is it people that were his business clients, his personal clients? But no, I have not seen such a list.
Another theory is that Epstein is well connected to foreign intelligence services. Do you have any evidence of him being a spy or a plant for another foreign country?
No, there's no evidence of that. And we did look at that extensively, not only this administration, but every administration that's been involved in Epstein could look at that. And there's no evidence that he was associated with, well, let me just not say there's no evidence. The evidence that people say exists does not point to him being any part of foreign intelligence. Now, as I will say repeatedly, I did not know Epstein. I was not part of those investigations. So I'm answering your question based upon what I know, based upon my investigation as a Deputy Attorney General for the past 11 months or so. So, but from what I've
seen, let me just tell you this. Yeah, you weren't an investigator. You apparently have no problem lying to people. You're sitting on this like postured bullshit where you're sitting there saying that there was no evidence. Here's the evidence. You want to know the evidence? The evidence is that there's no counterintelligence investigation documents that are being released from the FBI into Jeffrey Epstein. And there is a 0% chance that Jeffrey Epstein did not have a full active counterintelligence investigation into him, either as a victim or as someone who was operating, period. There's no question in my mind. Every single prominent American who has any contact with a foreign nation they have carte blanche to investigate that person. They shouldn't. I've argued for it. But there is 0 chance that the FBI was not both aware of and investigating actively, and more likely than not, probably had them either in prohibited files or they were in some sort of restricted access that allowed us to know what he was doing, because he was involved with the Israelis, and we know that for a fact. He physically had Israeli surveillance at his house, which is in the Epstein files that they actually released, whether they know it's a big deal or not. And we have no counterintelligence files from the FBI. We have 2 garbage criminal investigations. One was into the child sex trafficking thing or the underage prostitution. That was part of it. The other thing was his death investigation. There is no counterintelligence file that's being released into Jeffrey Epstein. Why? There should be a 200 file out of New York. There should be a counterintelligence investigation, either as a victim or as somebody who was involved in some sort of intelligence activity, as a co-optee, as a cutout, as a recruit, as a human file. It might be in Delta, which is the other thing that the FBI goes and hides things in. I guarantee you they're not going to release you their source files on Jeffrey Epstein and whatever he was working with the people that were around him. So why in the actual hell are we having the Deputy Attorney General go out there and say these things as though they're definitive? And who's the audience for that is the real question for me. Maybe I'll put the chat up for you guys. Is there an audience for people that want to watch Katie Miller sling nonsense and claim that I am the most conspiratorial person ever, but I believe you now because you said it to my face? Of course we are. These are the same people that believe that Joe Kent is a leaker because Fox News had some nonsensical single source reporting it. Do you guys know what single source reporting is when it comes to the tier and the hierarchy of intelligence? If one person said one thing one time and won't go on record, it's lower than whale shit. It's the bottom of the ocean when it comes to credibility. Every single person who is saying that Joe Kent is a known leaker is coming from a single person. It's a single source, which very well may be Seb Gorka, from what I've read. Again, I'm just reading between the lines. That's an analytical sort of approach to it. It sounds like the single counterterrorism official that they're quoting in the Trump administration is one person to Fox News, off record, which is a leak in and of itself, by the way. That's a leak to say that he's a known leaker, because in theory, that would be a serious criminal allegation. It's not happening. Jeez Louise, guys. We don't even deserve better psyops because people still watch Fox News. That's how I know we don't deserve it. I'm going to just end with one thought. We are not voting our way out of this because we can't even get a vote for freaking voter ID without attaching it to giving the government warrantless spying again for another 2 years. We can't vote our way out of it because we can't even get a vote that's legit without allowing them to spy on you. Let that be your palate cleanse of the day. If that's not the most sad thing that you've ever thought of, I have no idea what to tell you. That is tragically, disgustingly dumb. Support our sponsors if you guys would. Go to the link at the bottom of today's show notes. You'll find all the different affiliates. I just added Securit, which is really neat. Securit is a company that makes all the storage I use for firearms. It's also the people that have the panels that I use for creating the Tackleberry project and the display of if you want to have like an armory or a gun wall, that's where you go. Give us a like on Rumble. Give us a like on YouTube. Subscribe if you have not already. Some of you haven't. I know there are more people watching than subscribe, so I'd appreciate if you guys would subscribe. You can watch us intermittently. It's just, we're going to give you a contrary opinion to what people are happy about. It's not going to feel good, but I do think I'm coming at you honestly because there's no benefit for me getting on the wrong side of these teams. But I'm going to do it anyway because I just don't care. I don't care what they think because I can look at reality and I don't like being lied to my face. You can't piss on my face and tell me that it's raining and have me say thank you. Not going to happen. You may hear the Spotify folks throughout this program in general. Go ahead and follow us on Spotify, KyleSerafinShow.com. You can always find us on the audio other places too, but that's the one where you get audio and video. All right. Thanks for being with me today. It's been kind of a ride. I'm legitimately concerned for Joe Kent. Whether or not he is correct is irrelevant to me. Watching the machine activate against the man is the nastiest thing that you can see. And when you're the man in the arena, it's nice to know that at least a couple of voices of sanity can see through the BS, because otherwise we are just living in the clown world, the upside down, where somebody who's a freaking American hero for what they've done, who's put it all on the line and lost their wife in the same process, when that guy is weak because the commander-in-chief has decided that we're going to do something that his entire base was against 5 seconds ago, that is a really sick place to be. It's a disheartening place to be. So I hope you guys take some time away. Yesterday, my wife and I unplugged for a little bit and did Eucharistic adoration. Find some time to go to church and find some time to be quiet away from all this noise. It will bury you. And it on a regular basis, I feel overwhelmed by it. So I know a lot of you do too. We'll play something really funny tomorrow. I promise you. God bless all of you that are listening. Look forward to seeing you again in the morning.
Thanks for listening to the Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.